I always thought Christmas smelled like cinnamon and forgiveness until that year, when it just smelled like eviction. The sky hung low over the Boston suburbs, thick with snow-heavy clouds that dulled the light. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I stepped out of the rental car, balancing a bag in one hand and a tray of gingerbread cookies in the other. The front porch was still dusted with a thin layer of powder, and no one had bothered to shovel. I kicked the snow away from the welcome mat with the toe of my boot. Inside, I heard faint Christmas music playing, Dean Martin crooning something about a white Christmas. It used to make me feel warm. This time, it just made me nervous. I nudged the door open with my shoulder and stepped into a burst of cinnamon, pine, and something else. Lemon cleaner? The house was warm, almost too warm, and the lights twinkled in every corner of the living room. Garland looped around the banister. A 12-foot tree stood proudly in the corner, layered in gold and silver ornaments. It was beautiful, perfect even, but not mine. I stood there for a moment, waiting for someone to notice me. No footsteps. No, Evelyn, you're home. Not even a lazy bark from the dog we no longer had. I cleared my throat. Hello. Oh, hey. Madison appeared at the top of the stairs, adjusting her chunky red sweater. Didn't hear you come in. She trotted down, her smile a little too bright, a little too fast. She glanced at the presents I had tucked under one arm and added, "You can just set those in the corner. Over there's fine." I looked at the space she gestured to between a decorative Santa and a side table stacked with wrapped boxes that weren't mine. I forced a smile. "Where's the gift table?" "Oh," she laughed, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "We kind of spread them out this year. You know, tried something new. Minimalist vibe." Madison was always good at dressing excuses up in tinsel. As I walked past the kitchen, I noticed a tray of frosted sugar cookies. Someone else had made them. There was a hand-painted sign above the oven that said Madison's Cookie Corner. Cute. Subtle. My hands were starting to cramp from the weight of the bags. Where should I put my stuff? Madison hesitated for a second. "So, about that, Mom thought you might prefer the hotel this year. Just to give you a little more privacy, you know? No distractions. Plus, the house is kind of full." My brain took a second to catch up. "Wait. I always stay in my old room." She bit her lip. "It's kind of my office now. I've got Zoom meetings lined up through next week and Mom didn't want to move the setup." I let out a soft laugh, hoping she'd laugh too and say she was joking. She didn't. I walked down the hall to my old room anyway. I had to see it. When I opened the door, the lavender walls were the same, but everything else was different. My bed was gone, replaced by a sleek white desk, a ring light, and stacks of marketing textbooks. The closet door hung slightly ajar, showing neat rows of color-coded folders. My high school trophies had been boxed up and pushed into a corner. I didn't cry. I didn't frown. I just stood there, stunned. Like a guest. Back in the living room, Mom, Patricia, was arranging poinsettias on the mantel. She looked up when she saw me, startled, like I'd interrupted something private. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. "You made it." "I did. Good drive." "Fine. Little snow." She gave me a tight smile, the kind that closes a conversation instead of opening one. Liam was on the couch, glued to his phone. He mumbled, "Hey," without looking up. I used to come home early to decorate. I bought the tree once when they couldn't afford it. I was the one who replaced the broken ornaments and paid the heating bill the year the furnace went out. I was the planner, the baker, the supplier. This year, they didn't even save me a chair. Dinner was a blur: glazed ham, mashed potatoes, awkward small talk. I tried to tell them about my promotion, the conference I was speaking at in San Diego, but no one bit. Madison was too busy talking about her podcast, and Liam was fixated on a new crypto app. Mom nodded politely, but her eyes kept drifting toward the kitchen like something might burn. When I stood up to help with the dishes, Patricia waved me off. No, we've got it. You should rest. You'll need to check in at the hotel soon anyway. I blinked. Hotel? Yes, she said gently, like I was the one who'd forgotten. Didn't Madison tell you? We didn't want you to feel cramped this year. Cramped. In the house I grew up in. I nodded. I didn't want to make a scene. But something cracked inside me. An hour later, I stood on the porch, luggage in one hand, my carefully wrapped gifts still in the other. Snow fell quietly on the pavement. My car's engine ticked softly as it cooled behind me. I didn't know where to go. Not really. I hadn't even given them the gifts. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't part of the picture anymore. I spent Christmas Eve watching infomercials in a $49 motel room, and not even the good ones. The kind that came on after midnight, selling gadgets nobody needs, narrated by people who sounded far too enthusiastic for the hour. I stared blankly at a vegetable slicer promising to revolutionize weeknight dinners, all while the yellow bulb above my head flickered like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. The motel smelled faintly of mildew and something like old pancakes. I'd tossed my coat over the single worn chair, leaving my overnight bag unopened on the edge of the bed. The heater rattled in protest every time it kicked on, pushing out lukewarm air like it was doing me a favor. Outside, snow drifted past the window in sideways sheets. Everything was quiet, eerily so. I could hear the hum of a soda machine outside, and the occasional slamming of a car door in the lot. No laughter, no carols, no smell of cookies baking. And definitely no family. I reached for the gingerbread cookies I had baked 2 nights ago, still carefully wrapped in foil and ribbon, and set them on the plastic desk. I didn't have the heart to open them. Not tonight. Instead, I powered on my laptop. The screen's soft glow filled the room, chasing away the dim yellow light. I clicked open a folder I hadn't touched in a while. Christmas. Expenses. Inside were spreadsheets, receipts, and labeled PDFs, organized by year. It was supposed to be a fun project, something to help me keep track of holiday spending. Gifts, decorations, flights, dinners, donations. Every December, I'd gone all out. Not just for me, but for them. Especially for them. I scrolled through the rows. 2018, tree delivery, catered dinner, Liam's plane ticket home. 2019, Madison's spa voucher, custom ornaments, matching pajamas. 2020, upgraded mom's kitchen mixer, grocery haul, outdoor heaters. 2021, trip to Vermont cabin. I paid the deposit, though they promised to split it. 2022, family photo shoot, personalized mugs, airline changes. 2023, everything again. Plus a $500 emergency transfer to Madison when she forgot rent. The total at the bottom, $72,814.56. I sat back. It wasn't the number that shocked me. It was the fact that I had never even realized it. That I had done it willingly, without expecting much in return. At least, not in dollars. My phone buzzed beside me. It was Michael. Hey, I answered, wiping at my cheek before the tears even had time to form. You still up? Yeah. I figured you might be too. His voice was low, like he already knew the answer. There was a pause. Not an awkward one. Just the kind where silence feels like part of the conversation. So, motel, he asked gently. Yeah. Want to talk about it? I stared at the ceiling for a second before answering. It's weird. I'm not even mad. I mean, I should be, right? But I'm just numb. He exhaled through the line. You always gave too much. They know you'll show up, so they stopped trying to make room. That hit harder than I wanted it to. I used to stay up all night wrapping their gifts, I said quietly. Like back when I had 2 jobs. I'd find the sales, use coupons, hide the packages in my trunk so no one would see. I thought if I just did more, they'd finally see me. Michael didn't rush me. That's what I liked about him. He let the silence do its job. Do you ever plan on getting it back? He asked. I laughed, sharp and short. The money? No. That's not what I wanted. What did you want? I swallowed hard. I just wanted them to want me. The heater sputtered behind me, as if startled by the honesty. Another silence. This one heavier. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, he said finally. I know. I didn't cry right then. But later, when we hung up and I shut the laptop, I let myself fall into that hollow feeling. Not because I was heartbroken. Not because they had hurt me again. But because for the first time I didn't feel stupid. And somehow, that scared me more than anything. Because if I wasn't naive anymore, if I wasn't just trying harder next time, then what was I supposed to do now? I got back up, sat at the desk again, and opened a different folder. December. Personal records. Inside were files I hadn't looked at in years, notes I wrote to myself, letters I never sent, budgets I never followed, wish lists I never shared. Everything organized, everything waiting for permission to be seen. I clicked one labeled 2016, Madison's loan agreement, draft, and started reading. The red folder wasn't meant to be a weapon, but they left me no choice. It had started as something practical. Back in 2016, when Mom called crying about a leak in the roof and a contractor she couldn't afford. I took out the loan in my name because her credit was too low. She promised to pay me back monthly. It's just temporary, she said. We'll handle it together. But together quickly became just you, and I started noticing her subtle rewrites of the truth. At first, it was little things, her saying she helped with the loan when talking to her friends. Then it turned into full denial. That wasn't Evelyn's money. That was the family fund. I should have spoken up then. I didn't, but I kept records. And now, that red folder, digital, tucked away in a subfolder within a subfolder, was open on my laptop screen. It was Christmas morning. Church bells rang softly through the city, their echoes distant under the sound of occasional snowplows dragging along the slush outside. My apartment was warm, quiet, and smelled faintly of the cinnamon candle I had lit out of habit. It should have felt peaceful. But peace wasn't what I was after anymore. I scrolled through old PDF bank statements, naming them properly. 2020_momloan_agreement. PDF. 2021_Madison_emergency funds_chat. PDF. Receipts for repairs, deposits, tuition. All things I had paid for, then been erased from. There were screenshots too. Text messages from my mother saying, just until Liam gets back on his feet. Venmo logs with descriptions like baby shower catering, rent cover for Maddie, or my personal favorite, don't tell Mark. I clicked select all and dragged them into the red folder. It blinked with life. My phone buzzed. A video call from Michael. I answered. His face lit up the screen. Unshaven, but kind. Merry Christmas Eve. Merry, I said, half smiling. I was hoping you'd be at a better place than a motel today. I am. Home. Alone. with receipts. He raised an eyebrow. That sounds productive? I tilted the screen slightly to show him the mess of documents covering my desk and the glowing folder on my screen labeled Folder Red. He whistled low. You're serious. I need to be. We talked for a while about nothing and everything. Eventually, I told him what I was doing. He listened quietly, then asked, Is this about revenge? I paused. It's about proof. Because every time I've tried to say how I felt, they twisted it. Every time I asked for fairness, I was called dramatic. Now I'm done explaining. I'm documenting. He nodded. I get it. Before hanging up, he said, check your email later. I'm sending you something to keep it all in. A ping interrupted us a moment later. It was from Susan, the lawyer Michael had suggested I contact a while back. She had replied. Subject: Financial support clarification. Message: Hi Evelyn. If you have clear, dated evidence of consistent financial transfers and promises of reimbursement, even if informal, you have legal ground to request a refund or establish boundaries through documentation. Let's talk soon. Best. Susan T. Myers, ESQ. I sat still for a long moment. It wasn't about dragging my family into court. It wasn't even about making them pay, though part of me wanted to see what they'd do if asked. It was about reclaiming the version of me they always tried to bury, the one who remembered. I opened Michael's email. Inside was a simple photo of a wooden file box labeled, For me, not forgotten. There was a note attached. Print it. Keep it. Don't ever let them tell you it didn't happen. So I did. One by one, I hit print. The machine groaned to life in the corner of my apartment. Page after page, contracts, statements, screenshots. Over 60 pages of my history, the kind they wanted to pretend never existed. Each page made a sound as it landed, soft, final, undeniable. When the last one came out, I gathered them into a neat stack, slid them into a plastic sleeve, and tucked them inside the red folder Michael had dropped off last month, back when he still thought I might need it someday. I stood there, holding it in both hands. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. But with something sharper. Conviction. I slid the folder into my leather bag, zipped it shut, and whispered to no one, they don't need me. But they'll have to look at me. And this time, they wouldn't be able to look away. He came with excuses. I opened the door with evidence. It was late afternoon, the day after Christmas. The city had that rare, cold stillness, like everything was hungover from too much cheer. Light spilled through my apartment windows in a soft, wintry slant. I was sitting at my desk, mouse clicking through receipts, when the knock came. 3 short raps. Familiar. Hesitant. I already knew it was Liam. I didn't jump up. I didn't smooth my hair or rehearse a smile. I just stood, stretched slowly, and walked to the door. Red folder in hand. When I opened it, there he was, wearing the same puffy jacket I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago when he said his was too beat up for interviews. His breath fogged in the cold behind him, but his eyes were warm, practiced. Hey, he said. You look good. I nodded. What do you want, Liam? He looked down, shuffled his feet like a boy again. Mom asked me to stop by. Said maybe you'd cool off by now. She's worried about you. I raised an eyebrow. She thinks maybe you're just overwhelmed, he added quickly. Like, with work and stuff. I held the door open wider, not as an invitation, but as space for his performance. He stepped in cautiously, glancing around like it might bite him. Wow, this is nice. Never been here. I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen counter, pulled 3 neatly printed documents from the folder, and placed them down like a dealer at a quiet poker table. One had his name on top, Liam Walker, tuition transfer, 2019. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the lines he had probably forgotten existed. Amounts, dates, notes in the margins. March 2nd, need books. March 10th, gaming chair charge on shared card. March 14th, pizza delivery, $74.88. You kept all this, he said, his voice suddenly small. I did. He blinked. I thought that was a gift. You said it was for tuition, I replied, flatly. You said you'd pay me back when your refund came through. He didn't respond. I handed him the second sheet. Madison, emergency rent support, 2021. And then the third. Mom, roof repair agreement, 2016. He didn't even try to read the last one. Why are you doing this? He finally asked, voice a mix of defensiveness and confusion. I tilted my head. I'm not doing anything. I'm showing you what's been done. He gave a hollow laugh, tried to smile. You're blowing this out of proportion, Ev. It's just family stuff. No, I said. It's a pattern. He waved the paper, scoffing. You're really gonna make a list of every time you did something for us? What is this, a lawsuit? It's a memory, I replied. Because clearly I'm the only one who has one. He took a step back. I didn't come here to fight. I know. You came to dismiss. He turned red. I've forgiven, I said, quietly. Years of things. I've let it go. Again and again. But here's a question, Liam. Do you remember anything? He stood in the middle of my apartment, the sun catching just the edge of his face. His mouth opened like he might say something, but nothing came out. I remember staying up all night helping you write that college application, I said. Remember that? You told me you'd name me in your graduation speech. He looked at the floor. I remember you crying on my couch the night Madison locked you out. I gave you my spare keys. You bought a new Xbox with the money you told me you needed for therapy. His eyes snapped up. I was messed up then. You still are. You just got better at hiding it. He tossed the papers on the table. I didn't come here to be attacked. No, I said, walking past him. You came here thinking I'd fold. Again. I picked up the pages, slipped them back into the red folder with slow care. My hands weren't shaking. I'm not asking for anything, I said over my shoulder. I just wanted you to see it. For once. He stood there, unsure. The man who used to tease me for color-coding my notebooks now stunned by the sharpness of my documentation. I hope you find peace, Ev, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I already did, I replied, and walked him to the door. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft finality. I stood for a moment in the silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. Then I turned to my desk, opened the red folder again, and gently turned to the first page. Exhibit of family loans. They thought I wouldn't remember. But I did. And now I had proof. I found the Christmas gift I had wrapped for Mom, still untouched, buried beneath my coat in the back seat of my car. I hadn't even realized it was still there. The wrapping paper was slightly wrinkled, one corner mashed in from where my laptop bag had sat all week. The ribbon was still tied, if a little flattened. Silver with little red trees, quietly festive, but not showy. Just like she used to like. I stood in the basement garage, engine cooling behind me, exhaust fading into the dim winter air. My hands trembled a little as I pulled the package out. I hadn't expected the weight of it to hit me like that, not physical, but emotional. Like suddenly remembering a song from childhood or a scent from an old house. It was the scarf. Last winter, I wore mine home, a thick, hand-woven wool scarf from a shop near Fenway. She'd complimented it right away, touched the fabric and said, "Now that's real quality. You have such good taste, Evelyn." I remembered how my heart had lifted, just a bit. So this year, I'd gone back, found the same vendor, paid extra to have one custom dyed in her favorite shade of deep green. I'd even had her initials stitched into the corner. PRW in tiny ivory thread. But it had never left the car. In the rush of disappointment and awkward smiles, in the moment she told me to leave early on Christmas morning, I'd forgotten the gift in the trunk. Or maybe I hadn't. Maybe I'd known somewhere between her cool tone and the way Madison kept glancing at her watch that it wouldn't be received the way I intended. Now here it was. Still wrapped. Still unopened. Like a small, soft symbol of everything I'd given that was never asked for and never appreciated. I sat down on the edge of the driver's seat, scarf box in my lap, and thought back to a day 5 years ago. Mom had the flu bad. Mark was out of town, Madison couldn't be bothered, and Liam claimed to be too busy with finals, though I later saw photos of him at a concert that weekend. I'd driven 3 hours from Boston to the Cape with a Tupperware of soup, a bag of cough drops, and her favorite brand of tissues. She barely said thank you, but I stayed the night anyway, rubbing Vicks on her back and helping her into bed. I didn't think twice about it. That's what daughters did, right? A buzz pulled me from the memory. I looked down. A message from her. "Mom, Patricia. I feel sorry, but can you just let it go?" Just like that. No acknowledgement. No apology for the room turned into a home office. No mention of the years. Just let it go. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have said so many things, angry things, sarcastic things, sad things. But I didn't. I typed slowly, deliberately. Okay. After everything is clear. Then I put the phone down and got out of the car. The cold air bit at my cheeks as I walked to the apartment mailbox. It wasn't even 5 p.m., but the sky was already darkening, that grayish winter blue that sinks low and makes everything quiet. I opened my bag and pulled out the envelope. Inside it was a copy of the red folder, condensed, but complete. A brief summary of every loan, every payment, every ignored promise. I'd spent hours the night before putting it together, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity, of finality. I slipped in a small handwritten note, folded once. "For your records, E." Then I slid the envelope into the outgoing mail slot, hesitated, and added the unopened gift. It sat awkwardly at first, too big, but after a moment, I managed to wedge it in carefully. No one would steal it. No one would likely even notice it. But it was symbolic. And in a way, it felt like the last thing I owed. Not a peace offering. Not an olive branch. A receipt. A proof that I had tried. That I had shown up year after year. That even after the small humiliations and the silences, I still brought a gift. I still wanted to believe I mattered. But belief only gets you so far when the people around you treat love like it's conditional, something to be earned, not given. As I stood there, hands deep in my coat pockets, I felt something shift in me. Not a break. Not anger. Just release. They had made their choices. And now I was making mine. The lawyer didn't flinch when she saw the folder, just said, "You've got something they'll want buried." Her nameplate read Susan Miller, ESQ, but the way she leaned back in her leather chair, fingers steepled under her chin, you'd think she'd done this 100 times. Maybe she had. The room smelled like lemon polish and old paper. Shelves behind her were lined with thick binders, court records, and a small framed quote, "Justice is not revenge. It's restoration." I liked her instantly. She didn't blink at the red folder I placed on her desk. Didn't ask why the cover said "For me, not forgotten" in block Sharpie. She just flipped it open, page by page, pausing once to tap her pen on a scanned bank receipt. "This one," she said. "Wire transfer for $15,000 to your mother's joint account?" I nodded. She said it was for the roof. Said she'd refinance and pay me back before the holidays. Susan looked up. "Which holiday?" "Thanksgiving. 2016. She let out a quiet breath through her nose and went back to reading. The room was warm lamplight pooling over the desk, soft ticking of a wall clock behind me. Outside, the streets of Boston bustled with post-holiday traffic, but in here, everything felt still. Serious. A young paralegal brought us tea and left without a word. "I didn't expect it to go this far," I said, my voice catching somewhere between apology and explanation. "I mean, it's family." Susan gave me a look that was neither pity nor surprise. That's exactly why most people never act. The minute the word family comes up, everyone backs down. I looked down at my lap. My hands were resting on the coat I hadn't bothered to take off. Maybe part of me still thought this would be over quickly. Cleanly. "You're not the only one," she continued, thumbing through a stack of printed Venmo screenshots. "I've had people walk in here with years of debts, emotional manipulation, unpaid support, all buried under guilt. But what you've done here." She tapped the folder again. "This is clean. Documented. Intentional. And frankly, long overdue." That word, intentional, landed hard. I had always been the helper. The daughter who stepped in without being asked, who swallowed her pride in the name of peace. But this folder, this collection of receipts, emails, IOUs scribbled on old stationery, that was the first time I'd ever organized my pain. Susan leaned forward. "Do you want to proceed formally?" I hesitated. "What does that even look like?" "A letter of demand," she said. "Not a lawsuit. Not yet. Just a formal notice requesting repayment, citing the evidence." "You're not threatening them. You're stating, clearly and legally, that what they did was wrong, and that it has consequences." I thought about my mother's last message. "Can't you just let it go?" Then I thought about my bank balance, the missed vacations, the way my bedroom had been turned into a home office without so much as a conversation. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Let's write the letter." Susan smiled, not a victorious smile, just a knowing one. She pulled a crisp sheet of paper from a drawer, opened a blank template on her laptop. "You're sure?" she asked again. "I'm sure." Together, we drafted it, paragraph by paragraph. It was cleaner than I imagined. No drama, no anger. Just facts. Dates. Amounts. Signatures. The law didn't care about who cried louder or who showed up to dinner. It cared about promises and whether they were broken. By the end, she slid the paper toward me. "Sign here," she said. I stared at the line. My name, already typed. It looked too formal for the girl who once believed a text from Madison meant everything was okay. I picked up the pen and signed. As I stood to leave, Susan placed a copy of the letter into a manila envelope and handed it to me. "You did the hard part," she said. "You told the truth." Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked briskly through the financial district, weaving between coats and briefcases and the scent of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor. My fingers clutched the envelope like it was made of glass and fire. Halfway down the block, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. "Madison. Are you serious?" You're suing us? I stopped walking. For a moment, I just stood there, traffic humming, people talking, someone laughing into a phone behind me. I felt the chill on my cheeks, the heat in my chest, the weight of that message hanging in the air. Not, are you okay? Not, can we talk? Just accusation. Entitlement. Shock that I, of all people, had dared to draw a line. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and walked on, each step heavier, but steadier. The family group chat that never shut up about sales and baby photos went completely silent. I noticed it first that morning while stirring my tea. The drizzle outside had cast a gray hush over everything, the kind of weather that made you want to wrap up in a blanket and scroll old memories. The kind that used to feel like home. The chat had always been noisy. Patricia, my mother, would forward inspirational chain messages every other day. Madison posted at least 3 filtered pictures of her toddler each week. Liam dropped the occasional meme or anyone got Netflix login plea. And me? I was the one who filled the cracks. Happy Easter, happy birthday, congrats on the new car, even if it wasn't acknowledged. But after the letter? Not a single ping. No good morning son from mom. No Madison story about her dog chewing on her heels. No Liam video of him lifting weights. It was like someone pulled the plug on our digital living room. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed, checked my signal. Nothing. Then a message came through, but not in the group. Liam, private message. Do you want a meeting? Or do you want money? No, hey. No punctuation. No sense of irony that both options he offered were purely transactional. I took a sip of my now lukewarm tea and stared at the message. Did he think this was a negotiation? Me. I want acknowledgement. The rest is paperwork. He didn't reply. 10 minutes later, a ping popped up in the group thread. I hesitated, then tapped. Madison. Sticker? A cartoon judge, slamming a gavel with the caption Justice? LOL. I guess you win the drama award this Christmas, face with rolling eyes. No one liked it. No one followed up. But no one defended me either. And mom? Not even a from her. The silence wasn't loud, it was surgical. A kind of detachment that spoke more than words. You're not one of us anymore. I scrolled back through the old messages. Me offering to split the Thanksgiving groceries. Me confirming holiday plans, even when I wasn't invited. Me volunteering to buy the birthday cake when Madison forgot. All my little digital fingerprints, trying to hold the family together with emojis and PayPal. It hurt, but it also didn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't scrambling to fix it. I tapped the group icon. 3 dots in the corner. Leave chat? Yes. No fireworks. No, are you sure? No pleading notification. Just gone. I closed the app and stared out the window. The rain was steady now, streaking softly down the glass. Somewhere downstairs, a car alarm chirped and then fell silent. I wrapped my hands around the mug and breathed in the steam. I didn't feel free. Not exactly. But I felt empty in a way that left room for something else. An email buzzed in. I clicked it open. Subject line. Title verification. Action needed. Sender. First Coast Bank. Property records. My heart skipped. I had asked Susan to follow up on the house loan, just in case. I wasn't expecting anything immediate, but here it was. Dear Ms. Wright. Upon review, the property located at Redacted was mortgaged under your name in June 2019, with primary responsibility assigned solely to you as borrower. No cosigner is listed. We've attached the original document for your review. My stomach turned. I read it again. My name. Not Patricia's. Not Mark's. Mine. That meant all those times Mom said she was handling the mortgage, she was doing it under my credit. My liability. I had been unknowingly tied to a home I hadn't lived in for a decade. I leaned back, blinking hard. Was it possible she truly believed I wouldn't check? I opened the attachment. There it was, my signature, digitally copied, likely from when she had me pre-sign some refinancing forms years ago. I remembered the day now. She said it was just in case something came up while I was on a business trip. Just in case. They used my name, but they erased my place. No room for me on Christmas. No acknowledgement in conversations. No chair at the table. But my name was stamped into the foundation of their house like a ghost signature. The betrayal was no longer emotional. It was structural. And now it was provable. I closed the laptop slowly, stood up, and watched the raindrops fall. They hit the sill with quiet rhythm, each one like a truth I hadn't wanted to face, but now couldn't unsee. My phone buzzed again. Liam, again. Did you seriously leave the group? Grow up. I didn't answer. He'd cease soon enough. I saved you a seat, Michael said, pulling out a chair, not just for dinner, but for a new beginning. It was the first time in years I'd walked into someone else's home with something warm in my hands. A ham pie, homemade. I wasn't sure if it was cooked all the way through, but the crust was golden and the smell filled the hallway. I hadn't baked in ages, not since Mom started insisting we just order catering to save time. Michael's apartment smelled like pine and cinnamon. A small tree stood near the window, its light soft yellow. Not blinking, he hated blinking lights. Said they gave him a headache. On the mantel above the fireplace sat 2 stockings, one with his name stitched in block letters and one blank. A gesture. A quiet invitation. He didn't ask about the emails. Or the red folder. Or the letter Madison sent yesterday that made my hands shake. He just smiled when I came in, took the pie from my hands like it was precious, and said, "You didn't have to cook, you know." "I needed to," I replied. He nodded like he understood, then walked into the kitchen and pulled out a bottle of red wine. It wasn't fancy. Just the same brand we'd had once in college, when we accidentally drank a whole bottle arguing about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. He laid out the tablecloth, lit a candle, and placed the plates carefully. No rush. No performance. Just 2 people setting a table together. There was music playing softly, something jazzy, old. Ella Fitzgerald, maybe. Outside, the snow hadn't stuck, but the cold wrapped the windows in condensation. The door knocked once, gently. Michael opened it to reveal Mrs. Bickford, his upstairs neighbor, mid-70s, red scarf, hair like a silver halo. She held a tin of cookies and a smile. "I just wanted to say Merry Christmas," she said, glancing at me. "And it's nice to see someone else at Michael's table for once. He tends to keep good company." Michael blushed. I smiled. She stayed only a moment, but left behind more than cookies. Her presence warmed the room in a way even the fireplace couldn't. Dinner was simple. Salad, the ham pie, a bit of steamed broccoli I barely touched. We talked about everything and nothing. The trip he wanted to take to Maine in spring, how the ferry to Bar Harbor still runs in April if you time it right. He mentioned a cabin his uncle once owned, the kind with squeaky floors and no Wi-Fi. It sounded like heaven. I didn't realize I was crying until I looked down and saw a tear stain on the edge of my napkin. Michael noticed, but didn't say anything. He just reached across the table, resting his hand lightly over mine. No questions. No, what's wrong? Just presence. "I don't think I've ever felt this peaceful on Christmas," I whispered. Not even when I was a kid. He looked at me, his expression soft. You deserve this. Not just this meal, but this quiet. This kind of home. The room didn't spin. The ceiling didn't fall. But something inside me broke gently, like an old chain slipping off my shoulders. For years, I'd been trying to earn a seat at a table that had been shrinking without me even noticing. Now, here I was, invited, welcomed, seen. When I stood to help with dishes, he waved me off. You cooked. I'll clean. I walked over to the window and looked out. A couple across the street was building something in the snow. Maybe a snowman, maybe just a pile. A dog barked. Someone's porch light blinked on. Then my phone buzzed. I hesitated, then checked. Madison. FWD. Subject. Fine. If you want to show that red folder, go ahead. No greeting. No apology. No call for peace. Just surrender? Or perhaps just fatigue. I stared at it for a moment, unsure how to feel. Relief? Triumph? Nothing came immediately. But I didn't let it interrupt the warmth I felt. I locked the screen, slid the phone into my coat pocket, and turned back to the fire. For once, I wasn't going to let their silence or their noise define my holiday. This table wasn't theirs. And I wasn't going back. My mother always had a way of making deception sound like a small misunderstanding. A misplaced spoon. A wrong turn. Just a technicality, she used to say. And I used to believe her, until the signatures said otherwise. The cafe near the town hall was nearly empty when I arrived. Early January sunlight filtered through the tall windows, pale and cold, casting long shadows over the wooden floor. A waitress refilled the sugar jar without looking up. There was no Christmas music playing anymore, just the clinking of spoons and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. I picked the table near the window, back to the glass. From here, I could see the town's courthouse steps, where I once took prom pictures, where Dad used to park and wait for us after school. Before he left, before the house was remortgaged, before everything became something I had to fix. Mom arrived 5 minutes late, wearing her Sunday coat and that pearl brooch she always reserved for holidays and funerals. Her lips were painted the same coral pink she'd worn since I was a kid. She looked like she hadn't aged a day, and yet I saw something new in her eyes. Weariness, maybe, or calculation. "Hi, sweetheart," she said gently, sitting down without waiting to be invited. "Thanks for meeting me." I nodded, sliding a small manila envelope across the table. She didn't touch it immediately. Just looked at it, then up at me. "What's this?" she asked, feigning lightness. "Mortgage documents," I said, calmly. "You might recognize the signatures." She opened the envelope slowly, pulling out the photocopies I'd made from the red folder. The dates were all there. So were the signatures, hers, the loan officer's, and mine. Or rather, the one she told me was just a formality. 3 years ago. 3 places below the borrower, Evelyn Harper. She exhaled. Not surprised, just careful. I didn't realize they used your name," she said softly. I must have been confused. These things can be complicated, you know? I didn't read every page. I didn't blink. "You initialed every page." She looked at me, then at the waitress, who appeared briefly with 2 glasses of water. Patricia smiled and thanked her, then waited until she was gone to say, "You always were so good with details. So meticulous." That used to be a compliment. Now it sounded like an accusation. "What did you think when you saw my name, Evelyn Harper, under the section that said, primary borrower?" Her hands fluttered around the rim of the water glass. She didn't answer. For a moment, I thought she might lie, or cry, or play the victim. But she didn't. She just looked at me, straight into me. And that silence said everything. She knew. She had known all along. I was trying to save the house, she finally said. Your stepfather wasn't working then. And Liam was in a mess with school. I thought it wouldn't matter to you. You have a good job. You're always fine. I closed my eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Because if I kept them open, I might have yelled. And yelling never worked with Patricia. It only confirmed her belief that I was too emotional to be trusted with decisions. You used my credit, I said, voice low. My signature. My responsibility. And you never told me. Her reply was smooth, almost reflexive. We're family. I opened my bag and placed the red folder on the table. It looked out of place among the napkin dispensers and coffee rings. But it didn't feel out of place in my hands. I'm going to tell everyone, I said, meeting her eyes. Not for revenge. I'm not interested in humiliating you. But this lie, this thing that's festered under holidays and birthdays and fake smiles, it ends now. Her jaw tightened. She didn't reach for the folder. Didn't argue. Maybe because she knew it wouldn't matter. Or maybe because, in some way, she was relieved someone else was finally taking responsibility for the mess she created. I never wanted this to be between us, she murmured. It was always between us, I replied. You just refused to look at it. She stood slowly, gathering her purse. You'll regret this, she said quietly, not quite a threat. More like a prophecy. I didn't answer. I just watched her walk away, her coat flaring slightly in the draft from the door. Outside, the sunlight bounced off the courthouse windows, too bright for January. I stayed seated for a few minutes, sipping water that had gone lukewarm. It's funny, people think manipulation is a scream, a slap, a slammed door. But sometimes, it's just a smile, a pen, a signature line, and a daughter who thought love meant saying yes. There's something quietly rebellious about hanging Christmas lights in April. The neighbors probably thought I'd finally lost it, dragging out boxes marked Xmas from the back of my closet, stringing garlands around my apartment windows, setting out a bowl of cinnamon sticks next to a vase of spring tulips. But this wasn't nostalgia. It was reclamation. The real Christmas never happened. Not for me. That December felt like a closed door, a celebration I wasn't invited to. So I made my own, for months late, with a table full of people who didn't ask me to shrink to fit a seat. The apartment felt different that night. Warmer. The lights were softer, golden against the pale green walls. I'd swapped out my usual gray couch cover for a deep red throw blanket. Candles flickered on the dining table, resting atop a wrinkled but proud red tablecloth I found in a thrift store bin. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Michael arrived first, carrying a homemade cranberry tart and a look that said, "Told you this would feel good." Then came Mrs. Wilson from down the hall, her perfume always arriving 5 seconds before she did. She brought a jar of apple butter and stories about her grandchildren, most of which I'd already heard and still loved. The boy next door, Logan, age 11, shuffled in shyly with a card he made himself. Inside was a crooked drawing of a Christmas tree and the words, "Thank you for the cookies at Halloween." I taped it to the fridge without hesitation. 2 coworkers I barely spoke to outside the office brought a bottle of red wine and sat cross-legged on the floor, passing around plates of my home-cooked lasagna like it was some long-lost heirloom recipe. "I'm just saying," one of them said with a full mouth, "this is better than any actual Christmas I had growing up." We laughed, not because it was that funny, but because it was true. I stood for a moment, looking around the room. These weren't the faces from the photo albums in my mother's living room. These weren't the people I grew up with, or gave my savings to, or spent years trying to please. And yet, somehow, they felt more like home. After dinner, I passed out a few simple gifts. A pair of knitted gloves for Mrs. Wilson. A puzzle book for Logan. Scented candles, mismatched mugs, handmade cards. Nothing expensive. Nothing heavy. Except for one box. It was small and square, wrapped in silver paper. I handed it to Michael last. He unwrapped it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was a photograph of my mother's house, taken from the curb last fall, before the snow. I had written 4 words across the top in bold black ink. Not mine. Not anymore. He looked up at me, eyes kind but curious. I shrugged. It's a reminder, I said, of what I gave up, and what I won't carry anymore. Michael didn't say anything. He just took my hand and gave it a soft squeeze. That was enough. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, and the candles had burned down to nubs, I sat on the couch, wine glass in hand, feet tucked under a fleece blanket. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Are you going to go public? I'm sorry, but can you stop? I stared at the screen, not angry, just tired. Tired of being the one who had to keep things quiet for the sake of peace. Tired of being guilt for setting boundaries. Tired of being asked to forget what no one ever apologized for. But mostly, I was tired of pretending that love meant tolerating pain. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because tonight, I had a new family. A table full of misfits, neighbors, friends. People who didn't demand I play small or make sacrifices to be seen. And maybe that's what family really is. Not the people you're born to, but the ones who make room for you without needing a reason. They say memories are priceless. I used to believe that. Until I started assigning dollar amounts to mine. It was nearly midnight. The city outside my office window had quieted to a steady hum, occasional cars gliding over wet pavement, the soft blink of a traffic light changing for no one. Rain tapped against the glass like a tired reminder that even the sky needed to let things go sometimes. I had stayed late not because of work, but because the silence helped me hear my own thoughts. On my desk sat the red folder, now expanded with color-coded tabs, printed statements, notarized letters, and signatures that once meant, I trust you. Tonight, though, I pulled out something different. A stack of glossy 4x6 photos I had dug out of an old external drive. I printed them on a whim, but holding them now, they felt heavier than paper. The first was Madison's Sweet 16. She stood next to a 3-tier cake, smiling, surrounded by friends in a restaurant I had reserved and paid for in full. I remembered that day clearly, not because of the celebration, but because I missed a final round job interview to make it in time. Back then, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like love. I flipped the photo over and wrote in clean, black ink. Madison's birthday, $1,100, venue, cake, DJ. Next came a family trip to New Hampshire. I wasn't in most of the pictures. Someone had to stay behind at the cabin, cooking, keeping track of the kids. I spotted my own reflection once in a window pane, blurry and half cut off. I wrote, New Hampshire trip, $2,000, car rental, groceries, cabin deposit. One after another, I labeled them. Liam's graduation dinner. Mom's anniversary weekend getaway. Madison's bachelorette spa retreat, where I wasn't invited but was so generous for covering the deposit. Some of the photos had me in them, half smiling, holding a camera, standing at the edge of a crowd. I realized that's where I always was, at the edge, funding the middle, but never really inside it. I laid the photos out on the desk, forming a timeline of generosity. Each one a memory they probably recalled fondly, never wondering who made it possible. I wondered what would hurt more if I showed it to them, the dollar amounts or the fact I'd kept track at all. I used to think keeping receipts was petty, that love shouldn't be tallied. But love, I've learned, isn't meant to be a transaction. And when it turns into one, without consent or reciprocity, it leaves bruises you can't photograph. Somewhere between the photo of Madison's engagement party and Liam's Vegas trip, I stopped feeling angry. What replaced it was something quieter. Like standing in a room after everyone's gone and realizing you were the one who cleaned it before they arrived. I collected all the photos, stacked them carefully, and slid them into a red envelope I had saved from last Christmas. The same kind they used for gift cards and warm wishes. On the front, I wrote in neat block letters. Exhibit B, time I won't get back. No salutation. No message inside. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to Madison's apartment, and placed it in my outgoing mail tray. It felt strange, choosing not to say anything. But what else was left to say? She might laugh. She might roll her eyes. She might never open it. But if she did, if she looked closely, she'd see my face on the edges of every photo. She'd see the cost of every smile she wore. Not to guilt her. Not to shame her. Just to show her what blind love looks like after it opens its eyes. I stood by the window a little longer, watching the rain slow to a drizzle. I thought about how many memories I had tried to buy my way into, and how many of them I had been quietly left out of. But tonight, I didn't feel empty. I felt finished. They said they wanted to talk like adults. So I dressed like one neatly pressed blouse, navy skirt, the red folder tucked under my arm, and walked into that room like I had every right to be there. Because I did. Susan's conference room wasn't large. Just a clean, rectangular space with a long table, black leather chairs, and the faint scent of lemon polish. A tray of untouched coffee sat at the center. Outside, the January wind rattled the windows, but inside, the silence was heavier. Madison arrived first, heels sharp on the tile, coat unbuttoned like she didn't care how cold it was. She didn't sit. She just gave me a once-over, like she was appraising furniture at an estate sale. Liam followed, eyes on the floor. His coat still had a security tag on it, like he'd bought it in a rush. He nodded at me once. I nodded back. Then Mom came in. Patricia Harper had always known how to take command of a room without raising her voice. Today, she wore pearls and the calm confidence of someone who assumed this was a misunderstanding soon to be brushed aside. Susan stepped in last, briefcase in hand, calm but firm. She smiled politely, then sat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Let's begin." No greetings. No hugs. Just the clink of a coffee spoon and a folder being opened. "I'm here," I began, "because the financial and legal decisions made over the past 6 years, many involving my name, my credit, and my money, need to be accounted for. Today is not about blame. It's about clarity." Madison scoffed. "So this is the part where you sue your family, right?" Susan raised a hand. "Let's keep this professional. Ms. Harper has compiled detailed documentation of monetary transfers, property use, and loan agreements. We're offering mediation before taking formal action." Mom folded her hands. "Evelyn, sweetheart, you've always been dramatic. This," she gestured to the folder, "this isn't necessary. We can settle this quietly. Just take down the threats and let's talk like mother and daughter." "We are," I said. For once. Liam didn't speak, but he looked at me, and I could see it, recognition. Maybe even regret. A memory flickered behind his eyes, like he could still hear me paying for his car repairs after he missed 2 job interviews in a row. Madison leaned back in her chair. So, what's the price for forgiveness? You want us to kiss your feet? You want Mom to cry in public? No, I replied, keeping my tone even. I want what was taken. And I want it acknowledged. Susan slid a paper across the table. We're proposing either full or partial financial restitution, accompanied by a signed letter of apology. Not for legal satisfaction, though that is available, but for personal closure. For a moment, no one moved. Patricia blinked. You'd humiliate your own family like this? I looked her in the eye. You signed my name onto a mortgage. You used my account to pay for renovations. You told people I was unstable when I stopped covering bills. You erased me and kept my bank info. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Liam? Susan asked. He looked at his hands. I didn't know about the house thing. But the money. Yeah, she's right. Madison turned to him sharply. You're just going to roll over? He didn't answer. Then, slowly, Madison smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with the bitter satisfaction of someone choosing cruelty over apology. You know what's sad, she said. You still think any of this will make us love you. But you can't force love through legal terms. And you sure as hell can't buy it. No, I said, closing the folder gently. But I also can't keep paying for the privilege of being ignored. Susan tapped her pen against the table. We'll leave the proposal open for 1 week. After that, we'll proceed accordingly. Everyone stood, slowly. Mom said nothing. Madison grabbed her coat with too much force. Liam lingered, then followed. And I stood alone, folder in hand, coffee untouched. The door clicked shut behind them. I looked at Susan. You were calm, she said. That's rare in family mediation. I smiled, just a little. I've had practice. Outside, the wind had died down. For the first time in a long time, so had the noise in my head. I didn't want to win. Not in the way they'd think. I didn't want an apology shouted across a courtroom or a check sent in guilt. I just wanted them to sit still, just once, and read every word I had to say. Quietly, without interruption, without rolling eyes or cutting comments. So I wrote. It was a Tuesday in early spring, and sunlight streamed through my kitchen window like honey. I sat at my small wooden table, a slice of banana bread cooling on the counter behind me, and pulled out a sheet of thick ivory paper. Not printer paper. This deserved more weight. The first sentence came slowly. You may never see me as the daughter or sister you wanted, but I was always the one who showed up. I didn't rehearse. I didn't outline. I just wrote from memory. 6 years of missed vacations, emergency payments, forgiven loans that were never acknowledged. The birthday cakes I bought, the repairs I funded, the college application fees I covered without being asked twice. I held the receipts, yes. But more than that, I held space for all of you. And no one ever thought to hold space for me. I kept my pen steady even as my chest tightened. Writing this wasn't painful, it was clean. Like finally pulling out a splinter that had been festering for too long. I reminded Mom about the time she told me I was just better with money, and that's why I should handle the bills. I reminded Madison that when she got engaged, I offered to pay for her dress not because I had to, but because I thought it would mean something. I reminded Liam of the nights he called drunk, stranded, and I drove 2 hours without complaint. I wrote not to accuse, but to record. I'm not asking for a seat at your table. I just want you to remember who built it, who ironed the napkins, set the plates, and made sure there was food to pass around. There were no threats, no ultimatums, just the truth laid bare in ink. At the bottom of the page, I signed my name. Not Evie, not your daughter, not your sister. Just Evelyn, the woman who finally stopped waiting to be understood. I folded the letter into thirds and slipped it into a matching envelope. No return address. Just their names written with care: Patricia, Harper, Madison, Liam. I walked to the mailbox in the late afternoon light. The air smelled faintly of lilacs from Mrs. Wilson's garden next door. For a moment, I hesitated, holding the envelope like it might burn. But then I slid it in, raised the red flag, and turned around without looking back. Back inside, I turned off my phone. Entirely. No buzzing, no notifications, no "Are you serious?" texts from Madison. I made tea, watched old movies, and let the quiet do what years of noise had never accomplished: bring me peace. The first day, I rested. The second day, I cooked. The third day, I opened my laptop to check email, and there it was. Subject: Hey. I read it. From Liam Harper. I stared at the screen, unsure if I wanted to click. I didn't need an apology, but I was curious. Curious if even one person on that list had sat with my words long enough to feel something other than offense. I didn't open it right away. I made toast, washed my hands, dried them slowly. Then I sat down and clicked. But that's not where the story ends. The letter came in a plain white envelope, folded once, no return address. But I knew the handwriting immediately. Liam never learned to loop his G's right, and his E's always leaned a little too far left. It looked like the way he walked, slightly off balance but earnest. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I slipped it into my coat pocket and walked 2 blocks to the old park near Ashford Street. The same one we used to ride our bikes in as kids, when our world was just the cracked sidewalks and the sound of Mom's voice calling us in for dinner. The benches were older now, repainted in a shade of dull brown. The swings creaked a little louder. But the oak tree near the fence was still there, its roots bulging from the dirt like old bones. I sat beneath it and unfolded the letter slowly. I don't know if I'm saying this too late. Maybe I am. But I read your letter twice. I don't have the right words, but I'll try anyway. You've always been the one we leaned on. The one who kept things together. And yeah, maybe I knew even back then that Mom treated you differently. I think I just didn't want to admit it, because if I did, I'd have to admit I let it happen too. That Christmas, when you drove through a snowstorm to bring us all gifts, and Mom told you the guest room was already taken, I remember. I didn't say anything. I should have. When you paid for my tuition, or what I said was tuition, I lied. I spent some of it. I was embarrassed, and I thought you'd cut me off. But you didn't. You said, just do better next time. And I never thanked you for that. So here's me saying it now. Thank you. Not asking for anything. Not asking you to forget, or forgive, or come back into the group chat. Just, don't carry it all by yourself. You didn't deserve that. You were always stronger than us. Still are. Liam. I don't know how long I sat there. The pages rustled in the breeze, and the distant sound of children playing floated through the air. I stared at Liam's words, not because I doubted them, but because they finally aligned with something I'd always known and yet never heard. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been seen. And it wasn't just a line tossed in a text. It was ink on paper. Imperfect and unpolished, but sincere. My eyes welled up, not from hurt, for once, but from relief. There's something different about being acknowledged after years of invisibility. It's not about erasing the past or fixing what broke. It's simply this, being known. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I sat with it on my lap, my fingers pressed to the creases like they could absorb what was written. Somewhere behind me, I heard footsteps on gravel. Michael's voice was gentle. "You've been out here a while." I didn't look up right away. "It's from Liam. Good letter." I nodded. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. He sat beside me without asking, close enough that our jackets brushed. For a while, we didn't say anything. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of fresh earth and early spring. Somewhere, someone's wind chime clinked softly. Michael reached over, put a warm hand on my shoulder, and asked, "Ready to stop looking back?" I exhaled slowly. Maybe. Not today. But maybe. I used to keep the red folder on the top shelf of my bookcase, just high enough that I could see it without needing to reach. Like a lighthouse for my pain. A warning. A memory. A little too close, a little too heavy. But this morning, I slid it into the bottom drawer of my new filing cabinet. Not because everything was okay, but because, for the first time, it didn't feel like it owned me anymore. The room around me was smaller than my old apartment, but it breathed easier. 2 sunlit windows opened onto a backyard where the grass had just started to green, and a lemon-scented candle flickered on the coffee table. A photo of me and Michael at the coast hung near the door, next to a handmade wooden sign that read, "Peace, not proof." Michael had offered to help me unpack the last few boxes, but I told him I needed this part to myself. The cabinet held my tax forms, a few legal papers, and still one folder. The red one. I pulled it out slowly, ran my fingers along the spine, and flipped through a few pages. Notes, signatures, emails, receipts. Each one a weight I used to carry on my chest. Now, they felt more like artifacts. Before I closed it, I grabbed a Sharpie and scribbled across the front in neat block letters. Fixed. Not forgotten. Not forgiven. Just resolved enough to rest. I opened my notebook and wrote a line that had been echoing in my head for weeks. Not everything broken has to be fixed. Some things just need to be put down. I closed the book gently and exhaled. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, our old landlord from my apartment complex stood there with a paper bag in hand. Mr. Alvarez, early 70s, still sharp, still wearing suspenders that didn't match his pants. "Just came by to drop off your security deposit," he said, holding out the bag. "And some banana muffins. My wife insists they're for Michael, but I know you're the one who likes cinnamon." I smiled. "You remembered." He tipped his cap, then glanced at the small wreath on my door. "This place suits you. Looks like home. Feels like it too," I said. "Thanks for stopping by." As he walked off, I placed the muffins on the counter and turned to the stack of invitations I'd been working on. Michael and I had come up with the idea 2 nights ago, after dinner. Spring supper. Open table. No RSVP. Bring what you have, or just bring yourself. It wasn't a statement or an act of defiance. It was simply what I had wanted all along, a table where no one had to fight for a seat. I carried one invitation out to the bulletin board near the little post office a few blocks away, taped it right below the ad for a local piano teacher, and just above a flyer for a missing calico cat. Then I added a small card next to it in my own handwriting. "If your holidays were lonely, this table is for you." As I stood back, the breeze picked up. The paper fluttered lightly, but stayed pinned. Back at home, Michael was already in the kitchen, washing dishes with his sleeves rolled up and music playing softly in the background. He glanced over. "You finish?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I think I did." Just as I sat down to help dry, my phone buzzed on the counter. Message from Madison. I didn't reach for it right away, but eventually I did. I saw the letter. I'm not ready. But I'm thinking. That was it. No apology. No promise. But something not like the silence that had come before. I read it twice, then placed the phone face down beside the sink. Everything okay? Michael asked. I nodded. Yeah, actually, better than okay. Some stories don't end with applause. Some end with breathing room, with space for people to figure themselves out quietly at their own pace. And if they want to return, they'll know where to find the table. I'm Evelyn Harper. And if you've walked beside me through this 16-chapter journey, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You know, I never set out to fight. I only wanted a place to sit, a place where love wasn't conditional, where I didn't have to earn my way into the family I was born into. But somewhere along the way, I realized sometimes the most powerful healing isn't in being welcomed back. It's in choosing to stop knocking on the wrong door. What moved me the most wasn't the apology letter or even the legal wins. It was that quiet night in my backyard, surrounded by people who didn't share my blood, but chose to share my table. Sometimes, family isn't who raised you. It's who rises with you. And have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you ever poured so much into others, only to wonder if they ever saw you? If this story brought back a memory, leave a comment below, just a simple #1 so I know you're there. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this little tale has traveled. And if you love gentle stories that carry truth and heart, don't forget to subscribe. There's more warmth waiting in the next one. Thank you for staying with me, for listening, feeling, and maybe even healing, just a little. Until we meet again, may you always find a seat at the table where you are truly seen.